Welcome to the Bare Naked Shrinks.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Bare Naked Shrinks with me, Dr. Danny, and my fabulous co-host, Dr. Courtney.
Hey.
And today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Rachel Boutté, who is an assistant professor and a licensed clinical psychologist at Rush University. Welcome, Dr. Rachel.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
I want you all to say how you know each other.
Well, so I was thinking there's not a lot of people that know the PG version of me, which is the pre-Greg version. Rachel is the pre-Greg version of me.
I love that.
So yeah, Rachel and I were in the same lab in grad school. So we actually met when you interviewed with Suzanne, right? And so Rachel stayed with me that weekend. I was a second year grad student then in our advisor's lab, and then Rachel came in as the first year. So
okay. So you were in grad school for like at least 4 years that overlap.
Oh yeah. We went through a lot together.
A lot.
There's a lot that happened.
A long 4 years.
Well, maybe we can talk about some of that at the end. But to get things started, let's get into
cake and crap.
My face looks a little clownish because I had a treatment yesterday for skin cancer. And it's like I had to put this gel all over my face and then sit in this like searing, burning light for 13 minutes. With goggles on. Told Courtney I was going to send her a photo of what I look like without makeup. I have so much makeup on. I look like I got sunburned with tanning goggles on. And I said to the lady when she was putting the goggles on me, I said, ironically, wearing those tanning goggles is why I'm here today. So kids, stay out of the sun. So that was a crap for sure. And the fires continue. Matt and I are fighting. Lots of crap. Trying to think of any cake. Well, it was Wilder's birthday, who shares a birthday with Dr. Courtney, which is so fun. And so we had a nice long weekend, went out to a Mexican restaurant and just sort of celebrated him and had a nice fun. He turned 9, which is unbelievable. I'm like, how did almost a decade go by? Yeah. Okay. So how about you, Dr. Courtney?
So my cake was definitely my birthday. It was last Friday, same as Wilder. And I took the day off work, and so did my good friend Kelly. I started the day with a polar plunge with some friends in Lake Union, and then got coffee with a friend. And then Kelly and I went and got some like of the Forever jewelry. And
let me see.
So we got 2 bracelets right here. And then I also got a ring, which was fun. And then Kelly and I and 2 of my other friends, we went and did a hot tub boat. And so it's like a hot tub that's a boat and like around Lake Union. And it was
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was really fun. And then my good friend Katie organized like a big birthday celebration for me at a brewery and surprised me with like cupcakes and a balloon and tattoos of my face that she proceeded to run off to my friend. And then we went to lesbian night for camp, and they had some like birthday celebration stuff up for me. And then naturally the night ended at the Rose. So it was just like, it was a really fun day. And also my birthday last year was like shortly after I moved here and had gone through a bad breakup, but I didn't have any friends. And I just remember being like so sad and thinking that day, like I actually wrote on my phone that day, my goal for this year was to build community in Seattle and prioritize relationships because that's most important for my life worth living. And this year was just such a celebration of that. And I just felt so like loved and cherished and cared for and known. And it just felt really special. So yeah, I had a great birthday. And then my wrap would be that my friend Kelly that I was just talking about leaves for Australia today. So she has this really cool opportunity through work to go and live in Sydney for 3 months. And I am so excited for her, and she's going to have so much fun. And I'm also very sad that she's leaving me, and I'm just going to miss her. So
well, it's 3 months and not like a year.
I know, I'm aware. Well, I see her all the time. Like we literally go to camp every Thursday together. So, and I've done that for like the past year. She's my first non-psychology friend that I've made in Seattle, but also my first non-psychology friend that I've made in 12 years.
Oh,
so
my God.
She's special to me. We got matching tattoos on Wednesday.
What'd you get?
We got a violet. You can see it. So it's
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it. Put it right in front. Pretty.
Oh, that's really pretty.
Yeah, so it's the flower for queer women.
Love it.
What about you, Rachel?
well, my brain is still thinking about everything that the two of you said. There's so much information. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I want to say about those things. Focus. Let's see. I think for me, the crap was that it is very cold right now in Chicago. Like sub-zero cold. Like the Chicago River is freezing. And so we live along the river, and my spouse and I walk every day in the morning. We do this great walk along the river, kind of get the day started. It has been so brutal. Like we're very committed to still doing it, but it's like putting on so many layers of clothes and being like, I think we could do the whole thing. And just, when I work from home, I try to go outside as a break. And so it's been tough, and I felt very antsy being in the house and unpleasant with outside. My take would be I have been working on this massive grant for my work for, at this point, it's almost been like a year and a half long process. And I am finally at the end of it. Like, I am so excited. It was just such a relief to like finish these last few documents. And I just feel like I'm getting so much of my brain back now that I won't be thinking about this one thing. So I'm like super excited that this is almost done. Yeah.
Awesome. Congrats.
Also,
Thank you.
your dissertation just got published, right?
It was perfect timing because now I get to update it for my grant proposal and be like,
That's amazing.
the publication. Yeah, so it's really cool timing.
That's awesome. Yeah, Chicago in the winter is brutal. I remember my husband shot a movie there, and we went and visited him in Chicago in February, and it was unreal. We were like in Lincoln Park and would like hike it to the Damon station.
Yeah.
And my kid was in a stroller, and I didn't have an elevator, and we were like on the ice and snow, like trying to carry the stroller. It was like, I was like, people who live here are tough.
It's a real situation, especially if you happen to be from the South like me originally. Yeah, it's intense.
Well, before we hand it over to Rachel to present, I thought, given all of the kind of stressors that have been going on, we could share like a strategy that we like to help us like relax or calm down. And it could be something that you use for yourself, or like, Courtney, if you wanted to share a DBT skill or something. So one thing for me is deep breathing, which sounds so simple. I remember when I was in therapy, like in grad school, that was always like told, oh, do that. And I was like, that's stupid, it doesn't work. But it actually works so well. So I will do like 10 breaths of 10 seconds. I do like the 10-10-10, where I breathe in for 10, hold for 10, out for 10, and do it 10 times. So it's really simple, but it works, it's effective, and it kind of like down regulates my central nervous system. All right, Courtney, how about you?
I think a couple things come to, I think the first thing is like when I'm stressed, I usually like text a friend or call a friend or run to a friend's office. I think like I'm a very verbal, wordy person. And so processing like that is really helpful. But I think in terms of like a DBT skill, something that I practice on a daily basis recently is radical acceptance. I think I have a tendency at my baseline to something frustrating happens and my emotions get really big, and I can tend to kind of like freak out pretty quickly. And that's usually not helpful and prohibits me from being effective in problem solving. And so I think really shifting my mind quite quickly to, okay, this is happening and there's nothing that I can do about it because it already happened. How can I be effective moving forward? And so really keeping my mind on radical acceptance and focusing on the fact that I can't change anything that has happened and just need to figure out how to move effectively forward in a way that's consistent with what I want for my life is really important.
All right, Rachel, what you got?
I love both of those, especially the breathing. It's like the most underrated thing ever. I'm constantly talking about it. I lately have been really into dancing it out. So similar to the breathing, I'm really into somatic stuff lately. It's just a reset to the nervous system. So if I'm feeling stressed and things aren't working, I'm getting stuck, I just blast music that I love really, really loudly, and I just move around until something happens, like until something shakes loose.
I love that. I love that. Okay, well, I'm super excited for the topic today. So Dr. Rachel is going to talk to us about body image and Black women.
Everything is everything.
So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is so cool to be here. And what a brilliant idea to do psychology in a fun way that people are actually interested in learning about it. So that's awesome. I got into this area actually because of Dr. Courtney. I really didn't know anything about body image. I never even heard of that idea. And the lab that we were in graduate school, that was a big topic that Dr. Courtney in particular was thinking about and talking about. And so as I learned more about it, I was like, oh, yeah, this is the thing. I just didn't have the language for it, but it was something I had experienced lots of body stuff myself and knew a lot of other women who had as well. And I was really surprised and frustrated as I got into this area to see this recurrent theme in the literature, which was that Black women do not have any body image dissatisfaction. I was like, well, I'm a Black woman, and I don't, that's not true of me or any of the other Black women who I know personally. So it was confusing. I was like, why are they saying this? And it was very, like, there was lots of empirical data to support it. It's like, yeah, Black women, totally fine, like completely inoculated from body image dissatisfaction, eating disorders, everything. Like Black women love their bodies. Everything is awesome.
I
Um,
remember that era because I've been in eating disorders for like 20 years now, and that was such a thing. It was like Black, beautiful, proud, da da da, and it
yes.
was like nobody. It didn't even seem like they studied it. It was just like this like accepted thing.
Well, and this era, like, I just want to remind everybody, was not long ago because Rachel and I were in I mean, wait, it's been 11 years since I started grad school, I think
Yeah.
now.
I
Like,
started in 2014. So,
right. And like that, and like, it's not like it started in 2014. I feel like there was
no.
like a couple years there where there was nothing until like we really started getting into it. So this is not like the era. I feel like we're still in the era a little bit too. Fair.
Yeah. It's interesting. It definitely, there's been a shift. And it's funny, I was joking. I was talking to my graduate school advisor because we worked together on getting this published. And I was like, wow, I waited so long to publish it that the topic got popular. Like, when I actually did the work, it was still like, what even is this? But the reality is that I was contacted by a couple of journals in the past couple, like year-ish of like, hey, we're going to put out a special issue, which is actually where this paper ended up, about stigma and eating disorders. And, if you have anything, I'm like, I've got just the thing. It's just been waiting, not on purpose. So yeah, so I saw all of that and didn't understand it, didn't know why the literature was saying that when I knew for myself and many other Black women this was just not true. And so I got really curious about really trying to understand why the literature said that, but then also, well, what is the truth of the matter then? In like an empirical way, right? If I know that there is dissatisfaction, but maybe not in the way that it had been thought of. So the paper, which was my dissertation, was just trying to understand, like, okay, what does body image look like for Black women? And in particular, what does it mean to have body dissatisfaction as a Black woman? If it is something that is different than white women, which like, oh, it must be because otherwise it would be showing up. Dr. Courtney and myself and others, we did some focus groups with 30 Black women. This was back in Richmond, Virginia. At the beginning, it was very body image focused. I was like, okay, all the questions were just about beauty standards and how people respond and things like that. But I used this methodology or approach where you let the data speak for themselves. It's called grounded theory, and it's kind of a bottom up approach. So you get all the information, but rather than taking the existing theories and things and trying to make it fit, you just look at that information and say, what do I have? Like what came out? And in doing that, what came out was like so much bigger than what I had envisioned and a totally different place than where I started. I was very in over my head, truth be told, trying to interpret it because it got into subject areas that I didn't really have any research experience with. I had lived experience, but not research experience. So essentially, that model that I sent over, the conceptual model, was developed and it basically showed that like a lot of the body dissatisfaction in Black women has to do with structural injustice and racism and gender racism. So it is not body dissatisfaction as we generally think of it. It's something beyond that. So we called it racialized body dissatisfaction. And it really has to do with the fact that there are all of these images presented, right, in our society around beauty for women, and they are of white women. White women define the beauty standard in this country, and not just here, but around the world, really. And so for Black women, there's this sense of like an awareness. We're aware that this standard exists. We're also aware that by default, it's completely inaccessible, right? So it's not possible. By virtue of being Black alone, I can never reach this ultimate beauty standard of white women because I'm not white, right? So there's that understanding. So that's one kind of part of it. And then the other part of it, though, which is so tricky and so not a part of the body image literature, or hasn't been historically, is that if you don't have this beauty standard as a woman, it's not just like, oh, I'm not beautiful enough and maybe like romantic partnership and all that. It actually has real social costs that get into stigma and marginalization and racism. So that's where I was like, this is something else entirely and way beyond the scope of what I understood it was going to be when I started. So the participants talked about the fact that they would go to work and someone telling them, oh, you can do your job, like with your hair being that big. It just so many things, strangers coming up to people, touching their hair. Well, Courtney's been with me when this has happened. It's just like so many things and all of these microaggressions and really just the social cost element. And so then you get into, okay, well, how do Black women respond to this? It's like, well, there's a couple ways. Like one way is you just shift, right? Code shifting, adapting in order to assimilate more because it's so costly to stand out in this way. You miss out on things, opportunities and things like that. You are treated differently. So some people do that and then feel really not good internally because there's an incongruence, right? It's like, oh, I'm not really being my true self. I'm straightening my hair and I'm changing my voice. I'm doing all these things, which is great for me professionally. But then at the same time, it's coming at this cost, right? This not living as my true self. And then there was another group of folks who said, no, not doing it. I always think of this one participant who said, she said, I'll wear a pencil skirt, I'll do the suit and everything, but I'm not changing hair. Berets are part of my culture and I'm keeping them. Okay. All right. So we had this group of folks who said, they're not going to do that. They're going to just kind of be themselves. They know it comes at a cost. But then the issue was like, they know they can only go so far in certain environments and they know that they're going to experience social exclusion. And so they still ended up feeling not great, right? There was some protective stuff to it, but the reality was that no matter how Black women responded to this, everyone ended up in the same spot, which was really negative consequences for mental and physical health. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I mean, that was, gosh, I guess I started doing that work in 2017-ish, and it essentially like redirected my entire career path. It's the reason why I'm sitting here talking to you all. So, yeah, it's been interesting, and I think there's a lot of work to be done and still a lot to learn and understand as far as like the field of body image and how it intersects with some of these other fields, gender racism, stigma, things like that.
So I have a quick question. So obviously, Courtney and I are blonde, blue-eyed, super white girls.
Your typical like beauty standard.
Right. So as clinicians who, I do work, I tend to actually work with more mixed race Black women. I'm not sure why that is, but as clinicians, what is something that you would tell us to be extra aware of?
Great question. Let's see. I'll say two things. One, I'll throw in that what I just described is kind of like the main or the biggest finding that came out of that work. The secondary finding is another paper that's working on it now. But it shows that there are, which of course we all know this, there's multiple beauty standards. And so for Black women, and this would be true of multiracial women as well, there is a pressure to compare to all various standards with different outcomes, right? So like for the Black women, it was like, yeah, there's a within group beauty standard, which is totally different than the Eurocentric beauty standard. And they feel within group pressure for that. But then there's also the white beauty standard, and they feel the pressure for that because that's where you get involved in societal stuff. And then they describe this like racially ambiguous standard, and it was like, they felt that they were like being compared to these individuals who weren't even necessarily Black, but there was a pressure like they should try to look like that too. I think if you're working with someone clinically who is multiracial, one important piece would be to know that that person might have multiple beauty standards that they feel like they're being compared to. And there's this sense of, what works in one setting won't work in another, but how much can you really, mix this up, right? So we had people telling us things like, oh yeah, they're trying to meet the within group beauty standard, which was to be more curvaceous figure and things like that. And that was great, if they met that when they were around other Black people. But then when they got to work, it was like, oh my gosh, like you need to lose weight and, your business casual clothes isn't fitting right. And so then it's like, oh, I need to lose this weight. But then if they did that, when they went back to mostly Black environments, like, oh, you're too skinny. You look like a white girl. You need to be more curvy. So it was this impossible tug of war. So I think having that in mind, that people might be feeling torn, and there's this thing of just not, all the beauty standards, let's be real, right? Their standards they're not obtainable. So there's that. But there's this added layer of like not even knowing what am I even going for, and what's acceptable in one part of my life is unacceptable in another. So I think leaving room for that and leaving room for the institutional gender racism part, that it would vary, of course, depending on like how the person presents phenotypically.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, also, I think it's important to, I really have a group practice, and I think it's important to have diversity in clinicians. And I'm so happy that this year I got a Black intern grad student, and she's specializing in eating disorders, and so I'm supervising her. And, it's interesting. We've like done a lot of outreach into Black communities and have had trouble getting patients from those communities, even with Jasmine. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I would love to talk about that. One, I'm so glad that you were able to get a Black clinician. I mean, there's so few Black psychologists, period. But then within this specialty, like, there's just not many.
Exactly.
I have a comment, Nick.
Yeah.
On that, but wait, finish, and then I want to say.
I think, with regard to the outreach piece, it is so complicated, and I would say it's a great thing to have like a person with you, of course, that's like, hey, a member of the community, but it runs so deep. Like, one, the stigma, but also just the disconnect between what is generally understood about what is an eating disorder, what is body dissatisfaction, and the experience that Black women who are having these things have, that many Black women would say, oh, no, I don't have any of those things. And then we might, from a clinical standpoint, do a questionnaire interview and be like, you definitely do have these things. So there's a language barrier, if you will, around like, what does it mean? What is it? And also the fear part around treatment.
And mistrust of white people, understandably
and that the treatment isn't going to be appropriate, that it won't make sense for the way that this experience is occurring. And the stigma and the shame just around therapy in general. And then this is so specific that it's just like, I remember telling Courtney, I was like, this is probably second year grad school. I was like, oh, Black women you can't have an eating disorder. It's not a thing that you're like allowed to have. It's something you hear about that like white girls have, because they want to be skinny, but it's like, actually these behaviors, no, totally. Lots of Black women do these things. We don't call it anything. It's just, there's no name.
No, one thing that I've been thinking about, Rachel, as you were talking, and I think, I've been so privileged to have Rachel as a good friend, especially like in grad school when I started doing work into body image, because I think our friendship, we've had so many conversations about differences between Black individuals and white individuals, and, the dearth of research on Black individuals and the dearth of assessments that are appropriate for Black individuals. And I think a lot of those conversations have just been, anyway, wildly helpful for me. But something that I remember being really notable for me as someone that is very white and very much blonde and blue-eyed and meets a lot of the stereotypical beauty standards. I remember, so Rachel and I have gone to a lot of ISED conferences together. We had our first few together. And, it's easy for me to navigate that space, right? Like most of the people look like me. And I remember Rachel, we were friends. So I was like, oh, you're with me. It's fine. Like, whatever. Commenting that like she was like the only Black woman there, right? Like those spaces look so different for her than they do for us, Danielle. And like, it was just like something that I hadn't even noticed before. But I think one thing too is because that our spaces look so white, and there is an extra layer of work and labor that then goes into Black individuals showing up in those spaces, right? So thinking about Rachel and then Jasmine, like there's more that they're taking on by being someone that looks different working in this field. I mean, I think about UCSD, and I think the joke was for a while that leadership is all blonde white girls. And it's true, right? And I mean, I think we're the ones that have easier access to resources to get us to a place where we can get a psychology degree. And so I think that there's a reason that a lot of us look the way that we do because of the resources that we have access to. And it's not hard for us to show up in those spaces, right? So I think it's really important to consider that a huge reason why, well, I think there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons that I do think that there is such a dearth of Black individuals in the eating disorder field is because of the extra layer of work that comes along with being in that space, right? And something that was super notable for me, I can't remember what conference it was, Rachel, or what year, but I remember, so, middle of 2010s, really getting into HAZE and being excited about, focusing on weight stigma. And I think it was, I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, Rachel, but I think there was one talk that we went to that was about weight stigma. And I'm all jazzed, right? I'm like, so glad we're focusing on social justice and, so glad that we're focusing on anti-fat bias and things like that and having these conversations. And I remember Rachel making a comment being like, well, yeah, this is cool, but like Black people, hello, like we say hi, like what about us? I remember you being like, there's no focus on that here, right? And they're basically doing what Black women have been trying to do for decades. And I didn't realize that, right? Privileged white woman that I am. And so I remember that just being a really poignant moment for me. And then like looking around in the weight stigma and being like, we're all white here. And then there's Rachel sitting next to me. And it's like, really good point. Like, I think our brains, because of racism, just don't go there. And I think as white women, we have to be really intentional about acknowledging our internalized racism and how that impacts the work that we do and like what we think of as social justice. Anyways, that was a long tirade.
Yeah, no, it's helpful.
Not a tirade.
No, and yeah, Rachel, I mean, I remember what a hard time I had fitting into academia. My background is being from Oklahoma, a non-educated family, like growing up without that many resources and just like not knowing how to act and behave. And I'm thinking that on top of being Black, like what the challenges would be. I looked this way and it was still so hard. So yeah, I think that's important. And also your friendship made me think I was 35 until I had a Black friend. Be friends with people of other races. You will learn a lot. You will teach each other a lot. And I was thinking about that, like how lucky you are to have found each other as friends. And it's awesome.
And even within that, I will say, like, I remember when Rachel and I first became friends, being like, oh, you're like my first Black friend. And Rachel, you being like, that is a common theme for me. Like, common.
That's Black friend Barbie.
Tend to be like first, because I think Rachel like is like, I mean, your background is really interesting. I won't speak to that, but you are educated, right? And I think like one thing that we've talked about is like you can sound white, right? And so I think you can present in spaces where obviously you look Black, but like we're not going to pretend that we don't see color here. But like, the way that you carry yourself, you've been able to like fit in white spaces which I think a lot of Black individuals don't have. And so I think for you, you've been like the easy first Black friend, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, completely. This is probably not the right place to say this. Courtney, you will appreciate this. I am like starting a career in comedy. I know that sounds like super bizarre.
Wait, oh my God, we need to talk about this. We need to catch up so bad. We need to catch up so bad. Oh my God.
No, we're so
Oh
behind.
my God. Okay, wait, oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts.
I'm bringing it up because the first Black friend Barbie is like one of my bits from the stand-up
So you.
class. And it's
So you.
like doing comedy though, it's been so I am like in love with it for so many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is like it lets me say all the things that I want to say, but unfiltered. But my topics are the same. It's just like my academic work, except if I was just saying it to somebody who I know very well instead of like an academic audience. But it's great because my brain has come up with so many fun ways to talk about this stuff. And here's the kicker. People understand it right away. It's something that would take hundreds of pages of academic prose. I can do a 5-minute bit and people get it and they're open to receiving it because of that thematic, their body, they're relaxed, they're laughing. It's not this like defensive, what do you mean white privilege? It's like, no, I did this whole bit because my husband is white. Like this whole bit about card holders, like being married to a
Okay,
white person is
I'm
like,
gonna put you on the spot. You got to do a bit. You
oh
got to
no.
do a bit for us.
I can, let's see. I can do a little bit of the
Okay.
one I was about to describe without doing it. Okay, so I got married a couple of years ago. And marriage has been nothing like I expected. It's been great. And my husband is white, so we're part of this world, what some of us call it, who are in interracial relationships. And so what I didn't know, and this is crazy because I've been Black my entire life, born Black. What I didn't realize is that being white is like having the best credit card that has ever been invented. Like all the perks, all the benefits, top tier, full access VIP pass. So obviously married a white man, but I'm still Black. I got added to his account. I'm not the account holder. So I don't have the full, I can't like make changes to the account or anything, but I get the benefits. And not all the time. Like if he's not there, sometimes I don't get the cardholder benefits. But a lot of times I get them. And they are epic. They're up the chain. It's like little stuff that I didn't even realize that being Black was preventing me from. I will give you one example. Being a good person. I couldn't tell like, wait, you're a good person.
One
No,
of the best people I know,
yeah.
literally.
Listen to me. Being Black was preventing me from being a good person. Okay. So I told you earlier, I do these walks along the river with my husband. So we bought a condo recently and we're in this cool neighborhood in Chicago, River North, very nice neighborhood, lots of card holders, mostly card holders in this neighborhood, super nice. So we do these walks, so we're on there and we see this kayak overturned in this kind of banky area. And we immediately recognize it because we're like, oh my gosh, that's from this place that we rent from. So, just keep walking. No, my husband's like, oh my gosh, we got to do something. Like, what? What can we do about this problem? So he's like, why don't we return the kayak? And if we do that, they will be so happy. They'll probably reward us. They might even give us like a discount on future rentals. It'll be great. So I'm like looking at him. I'm so confused. And then I'm like, oh, card holder. So I'm like, dude, if I show up to this place with this kayak that they were missing, they will blame me for stealing this and also all of their missing inventory for the whole kayak season. I cannot just show up in something that is not mine. My name is nowhere on and be like, I'm returning it to you. Well, how did you get it? I found it. Penny. That's just, one tiny example. But yeah.
That's the epic story. I love that.
Cool. So yeah, that's a little part. Snippet of the bit.
Oh, I love it. That's so awesome. And so good for you for having a nice outlet. Like, wow. That's amazing.
Right.
Okay, well, did you have anything else you wanted to present academically to us? Because we can shift over to No? Okay. So let's shift over to
Interview the expert.
All right. I don't know Rachel at all. And so I would like for you said you're from the South. Where are you from?
Born in Louisiana and raised in Memphis.
Okay. So South, South. And tell me a little bit about your nuclear family growing up and what it was like.
Yeah. So Courtney kind of alluded to this earlier. An unusual family situation for a Black person growing up in the late 80s, early 90s. So my dad is a physician. He's an anesthesiologist. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom and got three older siblings. I'm the baby. And they all went on to college and advanced degrees. And so the joke when I was growing up was like, family's like the Cosby Show. It's like, oh, this is so weird. Like this Black family and the dad's a doctor and all the kids go to college and like no one uses drugs or anything. It's like, oh, so it was kind of a weird, but it was all like, I mean, this is my family, right? You're just born. And I was teased a lot as a kid because I went to all Black schools. And even though I moved to Memphis, my family moved there when I was about 2. I never quite picked up like the Memphis accent or anything. And I always stood out as being different from the other kids, even though, to me, I grew up there, but they're like, oh, you're not one of us. You're not from here. And I was called an Oreo very frequently, meaning that I'm Black on the outside, but white on the inside. So there was this feeling always of like not fitting in, not being accepted. And I mean, I spent many hours trying to fit in with kind of like typical Black culture as it was defined by my peers in that setting. I remember like practicing slang in the mirror, like, okay, I could just try to like sound more Black and then maybe, the kids will like me or they'll want to be friends with me. Of course, that failed. I mean, you're talking to me now, so you hear how I sound. This is how I've sounded since I was like 4 with a professor or something, because it's just my voice. So there were challenges, but I was always a really smart kid. Yeah, I mean, baby of the family. So I still say sometimes, like, so many people love me and like poured support and adoration on me that I was like, oh, I need to find a way to give some of this, which part of what drew me to being a therapist.
Well, can I interject?
Yeah.
I think also something, Rachel, that I find really interesting about your background too is that your family did not always have that status.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak to that, but
yeah.
and like your siblings had a pretty different experience than you did.
Yeah, my dad has kind of like have a complicated relationship with the American dream or the idea of it. I have a bit about that too. But my dad is almost like a quintessential kind of an American dream story, like bootstrap. So he was raised very poor in a small town, Louisiana. His parents didn't finish the 6th grade, like illiterate. He's one of 12 kids. And he went to the military. And at that time, they would give you like pay for your college, basically. So when he got out, he was like, let's go to college. Why not? As one does. Just, something to do. He was working at the post office at the time as like a mail carrier. Went to college. It turns out he's super smart. He has a photographic memory. And some of his college instructors was like, you should sort of like dental school. You should do something after this. Like, you really have a knack for this. So I remember he'll say, like, he's like, well, how much do, dentists make? They told him, like, well, that's a lot more than you make carrying the mail. So maybe I will go to dental school. I mean, just complete, no plan, no, just very casual, like, why not, So he takes the exam, aces it, does dental school for years. Like, oh, he doesn't really like that much. He doesn't like the teeth molding part. It's annoying. So then one instructor's like, why don't you try medical school? Try, like, it's something you just, like, go try it out. Okay. Then he takes the MCAT, aces it, falls asleep on the break in the MCAT. Fine. Goes to medical school. He's just doing things, working full time the whole time. He's got like 3 little kids. They're living in the housing projects in New Orleans and just doing things. So, I mean, my siblings, there's like a 10-year range. So I am way younger. I was a surprise. And so, I was born, they moved to Memphis because he was starting his residency, which was going to be at Memphis. And so for me, it was like my dad was a doctor, right, my whole life. But for them, they're like, my mom is sewing them clothes. They're living in government housing. My older siblings. So I had a much different experience. And it informed my experience in many ways. But I think the way that's probably most important is that I never felt wealthy or like we had money or extra or anything like that. And it to the point that, I mean, people at school would be, because everyone knew that my dad was a doctor, because like this big deal, black doctor, whatever. They would be like, well, if your dad's a doctor, like, why don't you wear polo? Like, and I remember I was home and daddy is a doctor. And she did not like that question. So it's like this disconnect, right? Where even though he's got this, great job and did end up making good money and all of that, he got 4 kids, I mean, it wasn't, it sounds different than it was. And it shaped kind of my thinking around like a lot of things, I would say. But money, success, education, and the American dream.
So that kind of is a good segue into how did you become a clinical psychologist? What made you interested in this field?
It was an accident. Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But by the time I went to college, my older siblings, everyone, was going to graduate school and doing things. So there was a lot of medical stuff. I was like, oh, maybe it'll be something with medical, but I am really bad at math. And so I was like, well, it'll have to be, I don't know. I just wasn't sure. And ended up taking a health psychology class somewhere in there. And I was like, this is kind of like medical adjacent. Pretty cool, because I liked the idea of psychology, but I had done one of those summer internship sort of things, and we were coding. It was like intake interviews with people that have borderline personality disorder. And I was so distraught by the stories. I was having nightmares, and I was like, I don't think I can be a therapist. Like, I was like so dysregulated by hearing those stories. I didn't know anything about, the range of what psychologists do, of course. The health psych, I was like, this is pretty cool. So I was thinking about becoming a psychologist, but I kind of took a different route, because I very quickly learned that even though psychology has a lot to offer, it doesn't really help Black people very much. And I didn't like that. So I was heavily involved in my church at the time, and they were doing a lot of good work in the community. So I was like, maybe I can kind of go that route and use some of this health stuff and help in this way. So I actually went to seminary after college, and I tried to do what would basically right now be described as like community-based intervention work. But I was at seminary, and so they don't have a lot of training around the empirical part of that. And the church was not super amenable to some of my data collection practices that I wanted to implement. Towards the end, I was like, I think I got to go to graduate school. I was like, I can help whoever I want to help, but I think I need the PhD, and I need the training that goes with that. So I ended up in a counseling psychology program with a health focus, and I really wanted to be a clinician, a therapist. I'm like, I love listening to people, and all the things. And that was my plan the whole time, even on internship. And it was finishing my dissertation work, the project I described earlier, that shifted me to be like, I think I have to do research. This is really important, and I need to try to see it through.
That's so cool. What an interesting story. It's kind of a little like your dad's, like this circuitous path. And it just shows that you must be very smart and good at a lot of things too.
What it does also that I didn't learn until about a year and a half ago? I have ADHD that was undiagnosed my whole life.
I do too, and I talk about it all the time. Yeah, it's you get hyper focused, and I have a million hobbies, and I'm an expert at a million things. So, and then you went to Virginia Commonwealth, and that's where you met Courtney. And then where'd you do your internship?
So I was at Virginia Commonwealth, and then I had a terrible tragedy in graduate school. My mom died in the middle of grad school.
You had a few rough things in grad school.
A lot of
multiple things.
A lot of like life events. So I ended up on kind of a modified timeline. So I saw that y'all had Janet Lacker on a previous episode. That I want to watch that episode later. So I ended up going to Yale for a year for internship, because I had like a weird amount of time and everything was super weird. And I'm so grateful. There's no way I could have gone on to do what I did after, hadn't been for that. So I did that for a year. It was almost like a pre-doc. And then I did my internship. I matched at Rush. Yeah, health psych specialty. And then I stayed there for fellowship in psycho-oncology, which I loved, but it's not right for me for a career. But I love that patient population. I just love doing that work. and then started this job as an assistant professor also at Rush 2 years ago.
Also, just to add, first of all, I remember I interviewed at Rush and I was like, Rachel, this is where you're
You
going to
did. You called it.
I know you're going to love Rush.
Yes, years earlier. Yeah.
So then though, so Rachel's at Rush, right? She's like, this is great, whatever. She gets a job offer at Yale,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
She's like, I'm totally going to go to Yale. Who gets a job offer at Yale? Like, not me. She's like, I have this great job offer at Yale. And then she gets a job offer at Rush. And she's like, I have Rush and Yale. And it's like,
I definitely did not say that I have Rush and Yale. That was
I'm like,
never said.
who is this person? And then she turns down Yale. Like, which
That
I get.
did happen.
Made a lot of sense for your career. But like the fact that Rachel could just be like, I turned down a job offer at Yale.
That's
occurred.
that's a card. That's a card.
It was a weird situation. I was just starting postdoc fellowship at the time, so I wasn't even prepared to be thinking about any of this. It's an offers you a job and you're on postdoc being paid, pennies. Like, I mean, I have to at least consider it, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. That crux where I was like, man, I kind of was feeling pulled for research, and that job was going to be very clinical. I also didn't love Connecticut, but I loved Chicago. Oh my gosh.
I love Chicago too. So you must know one of my best friends from grad school, Natalie Stevens.
I do know Natalie Stevens. Yeah, she was not my supervisor, but one of my first supervisors on residency. Yeah.
That is so funny. I didn't even think about that when I was reading that you were at Rush, but then as we're talking and you're talking about health psych, and so yeah, Natalie and I were both in the health psych track at the University of Kansas together.
Oh, how fun. It's such a small world of psychology thing.
And Natalie was my first lesbian friend.
Hey, look at you go.
So, Rachel, it has been so awesome having you, and we might have to have you again because you're one of the guests where I just have so many more questions and want to talk about so much more. But before you go, I would like for you to give us our homework. Work it, y'all.
I have a weird thing that I would like people to do. There is a Twilight Zone episode, kind of a sci-fi nerd, called Eye of the Beholder. It's a super famous episode. I don't want to spoil it by saying too much about it, but I think it presents a different way and a helpful way of thinking about beauty standards and what's normative and how stigma works. So I would love for people to at least read a summary on Wikipedia if you don't have it in you to watch it, and then just sit with it. Just sit with what that might mean and how that relates to some of the stuff that we talked around and how people are treated based on their appearance and how that plays into a lot of things that are important.
I love that, and I'm totally going to watch it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And you are the season finale of season 1. So everyone stay tuned for season 2.
See y'all next time.